Right, I think we can start with our third panel for this afternoon. Thank you very much for coming back for this session on information disorder in the Western Balkans. It's winter time, it's already getting dark outside, so I am hoping to keep you awake and entertained. And it's also kind of a grim topic, information disorder. So I would like to do a very short activity. So may I ask all of you to stand up? I will stand up with you.
Exercise.
Okay, let's stand up.
Okay. Everyone is standing. Tension is rising. So I have a simple question. So may I ask every one of you to sit down who thinks or is sure that he or she has received some sort of disinformation, foreign influence, whatever, during the course of this year? Oh, okay. Okay. So now we see what a serious issue this is. It obviously affects all of us. I must tell you that I was hoping for at least one or two persons to keep standing, because I would have loved to invite you to this chair to tell us what makes you more resilient than anyone else in this audience. But unfortunately, that did not work. Anyway, I still would like to remind you that please participate in this discussion. We have this empty chair next to me, and I would very much welcome you with your comments, with your questions. But first of all, let me introduce this panel. My name is Katharina Naumann. I work for Konrad Adenauer Foundation, one of the political foundations of Germany. My fellow colleagues from Friedrich Ebert Stiftung and Heinrich Böll Stiftung have moderated the earlier topics, so thank you very much to the organizers for having this Political Foundations Moderators Afternoon. Just a brief word about Konrad Adenauer Foundation. We have in our international work around 112 offices abroad. We are present in all of the Western Balkan countries, and we also have a media program for Southeast Europe that is based in Sofia, and that works on issues like journalism trainings, misinformation, disinformation, of course, is also a very big issue there, topic, and political communication. So, to jump right in, I would like to start to introduce our rapporteur for this panel. Ms. Tijana Cvjetićanin is the editor-in-chief of Raskrinkavanje, a fact-checking platform in Sarajevo. Tijana is the co-creator of two fact-checking platforms in Bosnia and Herzegovina, istinomjer.ba and Raskrinkavanje.ba. I really practiced, but okay.
You're acing this.
In 2018 and 19, she was also the lead editor of FemFacts, an international fact-checking project focused on misinformation targeting women. Since 2019, Tijana has been a member of the advisory board of the International Fact-Checking Network and has been a member of the working committee that is drafting a code of the future European fact-checking standard networks in 2022. And her other interests include social research, human rights, good governance, and media analysis. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tijana. Welcome. So after the presentation of the recommendations, we have four panelists who we will have a discussion about. The first one is Jasna Jelišić. She's the head of the Western Balkans Task Force of the Strategic Communication Division of the European External Action Service. So she also has the longest title of this panel. Working for the EU since 2006 as a policy advisor and strategic communicator, Dr. Jelišić has a wide range of responsibilities related to the implementations of EU policies with the focus on the Western Balkans. During 2015 and 16, she also contributed to the development of the EU's global foreign policy and security strategy, arguing for public diplomacy as one of the key pillars of the EU external action. She has also worked as a consultant and researcher for the European Commission, the World Bank, Freedom House, and Princeton University. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your expertise. Then I would like to present Ms. Adelheid Feilcke. She is the Director of Programs for Europe at Deutsche Welle. She is a journalist by training and started her career as a journalist for regional and national radio stations like the WDR and Deutschlandradio. In 1992, so congratulations to your 30th anniversary, she joined Deutsche Welle and became the founding head of the Albanian service. She is an experienced reporter and editor on crisis and peace journalism. She has worked as a trainer for the Deutsche Welle Academy since 1995. She studied cultural anthropology and obtained her master's degree in ethnomusicology and a second degree in cultural management. And I would like to point out that she speaks German, English, French, and also Albanian. Then to her right, we have Ms. Armela Krasniqi. She is the chairwoman of the Audiovisual Media Authority, AMA, in Tirana. A journalist by training, Madame Krasniqi has a long career in media and communication, holding positions in both private and state sectors. Her previous duty was as General Director of Albanian Telegraphic Agency. During this period, she was elected by 32 European news agencies as a member of the board of the European News Agencies. She's also been the president of the Association of the Balkan News Agencies Southeast Europe. Ms. Krasniqi has been the organizer of several international conferences, among which we highlight the News Agencies versus Fake News, where the Tirana Declaration on Fake News was drafted and signed by 13 European news agencies, and we will certainly hear about this later. I would also like to stress that her career includes 2 poetry volumes. So The End of Portraits, published in 1992, and Eclipse of Silence, published in 1995. So I recommend reading poetry instead of news that might lead to disinformation. And last but not least, we have Mr. Zoran Trajchevski. He is the director of the Agency for Audio and Audiovisual Media Services in North Macedonia since 2014. Formerly, he was the director of the Agency for Electronic Communications and has an extensive knowledge of the legislation related to media and electronic communications. Mr. Trajchevski holds an MA in Mechanical Engineering and Energy Efficiency and in Economic Sciences. He specialized in efficient liberalization management in telecommunications and broadcasting, and has also obtained a PhD in economics. Since 2017, Mr. Trajchevski has been appointed as a lecturer in business and international economy at the Faculty of Economics and Engineering Management in Novi Sad. So a warm welcome also to both government representatives. Thank you very much. And with this, I would actually like to introduce the panel, and we have a short video presented by Deutsche Welle for this.
Deluju mi da su sve 3 lažne, da je prosto eto neko spinovanje.
Ja mislim da ovo je treći ovde.
Pa ovu drugu vest zapravo da bankomat može spasiti život sam pročitala negdje ranije.
Za prvu vest da se gradi džamija, u okolini Sopota kažu da se vjerojatno nešto tu gradi, pretpostavljam da jeste to, čuo sam od ljudi, verovatno je tako.
alat koji je vrlo zgodan za fotoforenziku, koji se zove Forenzically, može da, to jest pokazuje da se radi o minaretima koji su klonirani. Najveći intenzitet kloniranja može da se vidi između dva minareta, koja kasnije uveličavanjem može da se vidi da su potpuno identična, čak i krajevi nisu dobro isečeni u softveru za obradu fotografije. Nekako je pravilo da se laž više širi nego ta njena dekonstrukcija, pošto prosto nekako i ljudi više vole da čitaju neke stvari koje su možda senzacionalističke nego neke koje to pobijaju, ali nekako ja se uvek nadam da ti moji tekstovi bar malo pomogu.
This information is really dangerous and it helped taking away people's lives during the war. When the pandemic broke out, it once again started endangering people's lives. My name is Cvjetićanin. My work is called fact-checking. We saw this huge viral outbreak of complete nonsense about what was happening to all of us, and people were believing it in such large numbers that we quickly built this network with regional fact-checkers and started helping each other to debunk false information. I came to Sarajevo as a part of something that was called the Peace Caravan. It was a group of peace activists from all of the former Yugoslavian countries who traveled together to restore real peace. Here in the Balkans, we have seen firsthand what this information can do, how it can be used as a weapon, how it can be used to steer animosities between ethnic groups. It's a tool of war. This is a global issue that requires global solutions. So global actors, such as predominantly tech companies, have a huge role to play in that. They create this product that is great for a lot of people. But with this product, they also create a lot of pollution that poisons your mind. So we're really trying to raise the level of media literacy. You as a user have not just the responsibility, but you also have a great power. That is your like, that is your share, that is your comment and your click. In fight against disinformation, if you're a part of a bigger union, like the European Union, you are a more important actor and a lot of good things can be done with that leverage that you have.
Video, and yeah, as we see, we are not alone. It can happen to everyone. And now let's see what are the recommendations. How do we tackle misinformation, disinformation, and foreign interference? Jana.
Thank you. So before we go into recommendations, I would like to do like a short run through diagnostics of a sort. So when you say information disorder, this covers a lot of ways that the truth is distorted and facts are distorted in the media reporting, in the social media, and then like general information environment. And in the Western Balkans, not just, but specifically for us, there are these influences on information disorder that we kind of see as the most impactful. The first is something that has been discussed in the last year's forum and beyond, and that is the media capture in our countries. That is that we lack true freedom of media, that we lack true media pluralism, although it appears to be such, but it's not, that we have pretty grave conditions for quality journalism that come from weak markets and from strong political pressure. And these are the political influences coming from state actors, coming from governments, coming from the structures of our countries. The second very impactful influence is the influence of our online, our digital information environment. Specifically, and most importantly, I would say the incentives that these like very large online platforms have put in place for new advertisement models that are pushing the media away from quality journalism and more into sensationalism and clickbaiting, and as Stefan said, something that is going to attract, that is going to make you engage emotionally, react emotionally, and thus provide revenue for creators of such content. And this is not a thriving environment for investigative journalism or impactful and meaningful reporting and stories. So this is something that kind of drives information disorder. There is also a not insignificant, I would say, influence of foreign state actors in the region that are sometimes intertwined to the point of being very hard to recognize which is which with homegrown organic ideologies or disinformation ecosystems that also very much influence and impact the way that our information environment and ecosystems are formed. So this is the very complex, I would say, like a whirlwind of influences that create something that is an eroding media sphere and a social media environment where people, as we also saw here, are finding it more and more hard to distinguish the truth from disinformation and other information disorders. So to give recommendations on tackling all that is really not easy. The hardest part, I would say, is the one that pertains to governments, because we know what the media need and what we as consumers of information need, but we're not getting that from the governments in the region. So the media capture by political actors, the use of public broadcasters as PR channels for ruling parties, the political pressures on investigative journalism, sometimes straight up repression of investigative journalism is all still there, is all still not tackled. We still don't have enough transparency of ownership in the media, and all these things that probably all of you heard 100 times. We kind of, when we discussed the recommendations from last year, was like, these all still apply. These also should still be implemented. So we're just like, you can rewrite them all. In other important ways to change these things, we thought of this like on two tracks. One is the track of making the population immune to this information to the highest possible degree. And here, of course, the key thing is to strengthen media literacy. And I always want to emphasize not just media literacy, but information literacy and especially digital literacy. And if you don't cover all three, you're going to leave out, you're going to have a blind spot for one of these influences, either the political one or the one from the digital platforms or the one from foreign state actors. So it's really, really important that these three are always seen as one coil, because that's how it works in real life. So the way to do that during our conversations has been, what was emphasized is that it's really important to start thinking about this as a necessary part of education, of formal education, and of education from the earliest age. The example that was mentioned a lot was Finland, where you have this type of thinking that from the earliest, from kindergarten, you should teach children how to process information and how to distinguish quality information from something that is not to be taken seriously. So this is one of the recommendations, is like, look for good practices. There are good practices, and these should be implemented as kind of a context requires in the Western Balkans countries. The second one, that would be a recommendation for the governments. Unfortunately, a lot of people see governments not as a cooperative actor, but rather as a hostile actor towards building up media literacy. So this is something that is very hard to implement, I would say, on its own. What is needed there, I would say, is also a lot of a pressure from outside, from the EU, from the international community, and a lot of support for any such efforts that we do have. We don't have a lot. We have some, but not a lot. For the civil society actors in this area, there was a lot of recommendations of trying to be, smarter about the way that we do things. So try to meet people where they are. Try to target your programs towards specific audiences. There's a lot of need to educate not just kids and the young populations, but to educate elderly populations, which are increasingly using all these digital platforms and tools without really understanding how to use them or what it means, the things that they meet there, the things that meet them there. So these are the ways to think about, maybe start changing your thinking about how to increase media literacies to be as specific, as targeted as possible, because different types of societal groups could have different types of vulnerability when it comes to disinformation. So coalitions are especially important in this respect. Building coalitions and building networks between different, like cross-sectoral coalitions is super important, because I think we all have different angles where from we see this monster, and different ways how we tackle it. So this is something that is very important to be recognized as a priority and supported in a lot of ways, through funding, through pressures of political requirements, etc. And one of the things that kind of stood out for me as a recommendation from the group was that the funding should also become more efficient and take into consideration what is already being done, not to replicate things, not to reinvent the wheel, but think smart about the best practices and where they can be implemented as they are and where they need some improvements and some modifications. So this would be the part of increasing media information and digital literacy and trying to build resilience against information disorder by teaching people how to navigate these very complex environments. Another track that we discussed was how to counter disinformation that is already out there. And this is something that is probably more of a pressing matter, while the media literacy is something that is investment into the future. And both are equally important, because this problem is not going away, and it's also not it's not a small problem now, as it is. So when it comes to countering disinformation, we had a lot of discussions about balance between media freedom and countering disinformation, because these sometimes seems to be clashing with one another. So if you have like recommendations such as regulate this or that, regulation is always something that can bring the risk of curbing media freedoms, because it can be abused if you have a repressive government or if you overstep the boundary of limiting free expression. So the thing that we discussed a lot was the way to open broad discussions again between actors from different sectors of how to establish criteria for credible media and credible sources of information. And a lot of things are, again, already out there. You have mechanisms such as, I don't know, Journalism Trust Initiative developed this self-evaluation mechanism where if you're a media and you go through this self-evaluation mechanism, you're going to see if you're a well-intended, professionally, responsible media outlet, you're going to see if you have weak spots and how to make them stronger. And the outcome is something that can give, audience and regulators or whoever information about how well you do your work. We have we as a fact-checking outlet and as a fact-checking network have a lot of records on who publishes this information, specifically, not errors and mistakes, but serious, disinformation, propaganda, campaigns, etc., etc. This is one set of information that can be used to determine media credibility. You have journalistic codes, you have codes of conduct, you have professional standards, and you have also, complaint mechanisms and a lot of different mechanisms of self-regulation that you can also use to track credibility of media outlets. So this is something that we discussed. Not as one of those things should be seen as, a score that you give to a media, but making it a comprehensive set of data about which media are doing purposeful disinformation campaigns and how to address that. And in terms of governments, the way to address that is to not fund that from public funding, from public money and public sources, so not to support that from those sources, not to support that from funding coming for strengthening the media from the international community. And what is particularly important and not, I would say, discussed enough is how to demotivate that, de-incentivize that on the part of large online platforms. So you should not be able to place ads on a website that is an anonymous fake news website. That is not something that you should be able to do by these companies' own standards. The fact that it happens, that's been happening since it began as a model, is a problem to solve, not a condition to accept as it is. That's one important dimension of that. Another one is businesses that place ads directly on these websites that should also have some sort of ethical criteria when they decide where they want to advertise and where they don't want to advertise. So if you don't want your brand to be seen next to a flat-out propaganda machine for, invasion on Ukraine, you should be, aware of the fact where you reach your audience. So this is something that we put in the recommendations for a lot of different actors to try to engage, to take an active approach in de-incentivizing such practices. This doesn't mean that you're going to ban someone from publishing or that you're going to regulate the internet in withdrawing some sort of license from someone, but you're not going to award it, which is what's happening. And that's the important difference, I would say, in how you tackle this. So
just to remind you of the time.
Oh, I knew this was going to happen. Okay, I'm just going to run through another thing that I find really important, and that is that the recommendation for the European Union and specifically for the European Union is to try to advocate for us as Western Balkans to receive the same treatment as the EU member states when it comes to the behavior of tech companies, of large online platforms. We have a very good document that is called Code of Practice Against Disinformation, the strengthened one that was recently developed. On paper, it looks lovely. If it's implemented, that's going to be great. And if it's implemented in the Western Balkans, a lot of these things that we discussed will be significantly better than they are now. And since I'm over time, I'm going to stop, but that's the one that I found really, really important to mention.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tijana, for dissecting all these complex influences and also for giving some best practices already, like the Journalism Trust Initiative. I'm sure we will discuss further ways how to deal with this, but first I would like to ask Jasna to please explain to us the comprehensive approach of your task force in dealing with this.
Thank you. Tijana explained really how comprehensive the problem is and how multi-layered it is. So our approach in the European External Action Service, including the Western Balkans Task Force that I work with, had to take a large scope of actions in order to tackle the problem. One of them was exactly the dialogue with the big platforms, getting them to start a third-party program, fact-checking program in the Western Balkans and others. But just to feedback directly to what you said when it comes to the big platforms, as you know, the code of practice was a self-regulatory initiative. And that got us this far, which in my view is not very far. That's why we have Digital Service Act, and we really hope that the Digital Service Act, at least when it comes to the big platform, will take care, when it kicks in and starts being implemented, will take care of this issue sufficiently in big languages and small languages, and including the Western Balkans. But in the meantime, when it comes to the platforms and other aspects of the problem, what I wanted to say is, for us, was really important to first understand the problem, to understand what is happening. And the situation in the region, in some ways, echoes what is happening in other parts of the world, but in others is different. And on the basis of that situational awareness, what was important for us was to support local actors to unpack this problem in their local environments. As some of you might recall, supporting local disinformation studies, so the local community builds the muscle to be able to detect and expose. And this is something that leads to awareness raising, which is necessary in order to build resilience of the population. As you know, considering the environment that Tijana explained, it is impossible to stop the distribution of this information. Our best chance is to build resilience to it. So awareness raising was one thing, supporting local studies and exposing, work with local fact checkers, which is a short-term measure but absolutely necessary. Then the fact checkers getting into regional networks to work on it. We also work on facilitating collaboration between media and fact checkers, and actually it's going to be on the 10th and 11th of November in Tirana that we will again gather fact checkers and media to discuss this issue, to also see how the EU funding is going to be channeled to tackle this problem, but also support quality reporting and professional media. So there is a broad range of things. I think when it comes to resilience building through UNESCO, Council of Europe, other UN agencies, other international partners. The EU has around 25 media literacy initiatives in the region. And these are like projects until we really have, as Tijana said, mainstreaming media literacy and digital literacy as a part of education. But media literacy is not something that's going to give us quick results, but this is something that is absolutely essential. Critical thinking and media and digital literacy are going to be essential tools for being a citizen in Europe and being able to navigate the challenges of the 21st century. But what I wanted to say also, when it comes to the recommendations that I read, it's also very important to understand the terms correctly. You might recall that we started discussing this topic using the term fake news, and that was abandoned because it very often became insufficient because the challenge kept evolving. And then it was about disinformation, and the EU came up with the definitions, and it became a normative power when it comes to action plan, dealing with disinformation, what is necessary. And then we realized that the problem keeps additionally evolving. So there is a lot of ways in which you can manipulate information without necessarily conducting disinformation, which is why we now call it FIMI, which is like a foreign information manipulation and interference. And sometimes happening in the interplay with the local actors that Tijana described. And I also see that in some of the recommendations, misinformation is also mentioned, which is also something that we see. But this is not something that can be tackled in policy terms, because misinformation, at least it's widely understood, is something that does not happen intentionally. It's not a coordinated malign activity with the aim to manipulate people into voting or doing something against their own interest, which is the definition of disinformation. Misinformation is at the level of journalistic error, which can happen. It cannot be treated in policy terms. It's just for all of you, and I hope that all of these recommendations that you discussed, that you're going to be working with them when you go back to your communities in your countries. So I wanted to say also that sustainable business models is definitely something that the EU has been discussing. We will discuss them again in Tirana when we meet for this another big consultation with the civil society fact checkers actually and journalists. You know that, for example, when it comes to investigative journalism, let's be frank, I am not sure it would exist in the region if it wasn't for the international donors consistently supporting it, and especially the European Union. I think it's really, really important now. 5 years ago, when we had our first missions to the region to see with whom we can collaborate, because we really, what we do in partnership with the local organizations. I think a lot has been done. The region knows way more about this problem than it knew 5 years ago. So awareness raising is done, analytics is done. I think priority now is on addressing. addressing this problem in this kind of complex set of activities. Some of them are short-term measures, like the fact-checking. Some of them are investing in professional journalism and really raising the awareness because professional journalists have a special responsibility to really narrow the space for misinformation and to raise the integrity in media. Following the recommendations that the Commission keeps giving every year in the country reports for the Western Balkans 6, I think it cannot, these requirements are not going away. They're absolutely essential to be done, and they're a part. This is already featuring very, very prominently in the EU accession process, and it has to continue to be there. My last point is really that this is something where nobody can succeed in this alone. This requires a whole of a government activity, as in our EU member states. The whole government, almost every ministry has responsibilities and measures to take in order to create an environment in which space for disinformation will be narrowed, including allowing an environment in which civil society and media can do their part of the job. The EU, rest assured, will be there to support these actions, both on governmental side and on civil society side. We will continue. So far, everything that we have achieved in the region has been done thanks to great collaboration of civil society, who really picked up very quickly and built their capacity to deal with this issue. There are all sorts of things also. We have been supporting self-regulation in media, training regulatory bodies to be able to download the acquis, whatever is coming from the EU acquis communautaire. Regulatory bodies are equipped, recommendations are there, so there's really a shared responsibility for this. As written and is agreed at the Burdo Summit, both the EU summit and the Western Balkans aligned with it, is that we share responsibility for implementation of this policy, which is the EU accession process and the Western Balkans joining the EU, and share responsibility for communication about this relationship. It's really important to and the EU is really ready to support the governmental side as well as civil society side and media, so this multi-layered problem is tackled.
Thank you very much, Jasna. Many of the points that you have raised, like collaboration of media and fact-checkers, training regulatory bodies, etc., media literacy, I think we will come back to all of these issues later. But first, I would like to hand over to Adelheid. Some of the words that were dropped were quality reporting, investigative reporting, independence, and that leads me over to you and to the question, how do you work in the region? How do you tackle misinformation, and how do you do your fact-checking in your respective newsrooms?
Yeah, thank you, Katharina. Exactly, we were all mentioning the same keywords, and I think these are exactly the words that are very important for it. What Jasna just said was a positive and how to say,
aspirational,
inspiring political view on the situation of the media in the Western Balkans, and I would like to talk a bit more from the practical side of a journalistic day-to-day reporting perspective. So, as you all know, we have a very complicated situation of the media in the Western Balkans, and I just wanted to check, maybe if you think about yourself, what kind of media do you consume today, and what is quality media? We were talking about public service media before that, and are you getting your information on TikTok or Instagram or classical media outlets, or just somebody who is posting something? So this is a very complicated environment for all of us, not only for the regulatory bodies or for you as NGO representatives or civil society representatives, but also for us as journalists. And I'm working for Deutsche Welle, as you know, and we are very, very closely cooperating, and this is my first point, to pick up the one who has been mentioning before, cooperation is key. And we very much cooperate with individual journalists, with media in the region. And I think this is part of the success and part of the necessity also to strengthen local media and also to have access to the market for us. So it's a win-win situation for both of us. And I think this is also something that gives a lot of backing to local journalists. And this is why I'm also mentioning it, because when we talk about disinformation or fake news or threatening journalists, which is happening every day in our lovely Western Balkan countries, we have to consider that cooperation with international partners is very important to our local partners. So this was my first point, cooperation. And the second thing, if it comes to, I mentioned the platforms, I think it's very important to meet our audience, our users, our readers, viewers there where they are. So this is one of our very important investigations and innovations we are doing every year. Where are people? So, for example, we are now on Instagram in Nashki and in Šib. Because, of course, we use local languages, because otherwise we cannot reach out to our audience. And the third point I would like to make, and I think this is also typical, I don't want to talk about Deutsche Welle, but I think these are all the challenges every media representative is facing. Who do we address? It's very important to be clear, what is your target group, who do you want to address? And for us it's very important to reach out to young people. So I would say younger than all of us here in the room, because people who are still in the phase of trying to find their position. What am I going to do? Do I want to leave the country? Do I want to leave? Do I want to get politically involved in my country? Do I want to work abroad? So. Especially the young generation is still in the phase of trying to find out where to go, what to do. And I think this is very important if we talk about media literacy. We have been talking about this. Media literacy addresses even younger generation, but we as journalists are very much concentrating on also a younger generation of users. So this was the third point. The fourth point, I also wanted to pick up one of the words that has been mentioned before, investigating. So I think it is one of the, I would say, holy duties as an international media outlet has to support investigations in the region. And because many of our partner media in the region are very small and have very few journalists, and it's a question of cooperation, but it's also a question of supporting investigative journalism. And this is why this is a very important part of our daily work. The fifth one now comes to the question of what do we do to tackle fake news and to help to debunk disinformation and fake news. And I found it very interesting what Jasna said when she said, we bring local fact-checkers together with media. And talking about our organization, we have set up a huge department of fact-checking inside our organization. And of course, I understand that local and small media don't have the capacity to do it. But I think this is, again, a very important point of cooperation, because fact-checking is powerful if we join forces. And I really think that the bigger media in the region should also think of setting up their own fact-checking department. And as you saw in the small video, there are very many local fact-checkers in the region, and we if we all put all our forces together, we can reach a huge effect, because we all should, first of all, put these fact-checkings together and then to publish it. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, which is also very important, because we are in the Western Balkans, as you all know, we have a lot of depression, and people are still frustrated about the situation, and young people are leaving their home countries. And this is why we are very much in solution-orientated journalism. And this is also, I think, an approach which is helping to empower a younger generation if we more look into the solutions of problems. So, for example, if we shouldn't complain about this or that, but we should look at what are the solutions, what can be done to overcome this problem. And these are the first aspects I wanted to mention, maybe later.
Okay, thank you very much, Adelheid, and thank you also for mentioning constructive journalism. I think this is also something that can be part of the recommendations even. I want to pick up on your statement, cooperation is key. So we are not powerless, actually, against disinformation. And with that, I would like to hand over to Armela, because we've talked earlier that you have quite some experience with cooperation in this area. So please tell us about your experience.
Okay, I would like first to thank you about this organization, especially for this topic, info disorder, because I have to recall in my mind when Alexander Karchenko, the general director of Ukrinform, was saying to everyone, to all the news agencies, but not only, that Russia was doing propaganda through Telegram. Russia was doing propaganda through all the televisions, radios, but Facebook and everything. No one has ears to listen to him. No one. Me, myself, I can reveal that when I was in the board of news agencies and listening oftenly Alexander, my friend, saying this thing, I was thinking, probably he's complaining too much. Mm-hmm. That was my perspective. No one of us could imagine the force of disinformation or propaganda, because I think that you divide it in to disinformation and misinformation, but I think that is even malinformation, and inside of that is propaganda. And I think that all these components of info disorder, we call this shortly, I think that we have to face all of this. And what we have done previously, now I'm the chair of Albanian Audiovisual Authority, which is a regulator about the radio and televisions. But before of that, I was DG of news agency in Tirana or in Albania. And in 2018, we got, as a news agency, we got an idea to collect, together in Tirana, every colleague who wants to join us to sign up all together a resolution. And the resolution was against fake news. It was 2018, and it was the only term that we knew at that time. Why it happens? It was not a contribution to no one. No one from the politics, no one from the civil society, no one from the journalists itself, but from these news agencies, which every day, because they have to be always trustful and very good sources of information. Because of this difficulty, they needed to collect all together and to have this resolution, and it was with a lot of articles inside. And what can I tell to my experience is that, for example, during we had an earthquake in 2019 November, and I can say that it was spread early in the morning, some news that there were 200 or 300, I don't remember exactly the number of the victims, and it was spread by a very famous daily, I don't say the name, but it was .uk. So you can imagine the people who lives outside the Albania calling mothers and fathers, and it was like a chaos. Even this kind of, it was a kind of misinformation at the time. It was not disinformation because let's say these numbers were got by from the Facebook. But what did we do as a news agency? We spread immediately that we don't have the we don't have a number because it was 6 in the morning, and we don't have the number. The damage is as we can see in the field. It's this and that, but we will keep informed. And you know, this .uk removed the news. And it was, let's say, the first impact, because in this Tirana resolution that we signed, there were 13 news agencies, starting from Press Police Agency, Agar Press, Romania, Bulgaria, Poland, Ukraine, Montenegro, Kosovo, Athens, and a lot of countries, let's say Southeast Europe, Anatolia also. So it was something that we networked together, and we decided, because of the need, because of the daily basis job, that we needed to cross-check the information that we get from different sources for each country, because, you know, news agencies publish not only the daily news of the country, but in other countries. So, being back in my position, some refer to me like a state regulatory, but in Albania, according to the law, we are independent body, and the institution works with, of course, we have the Council of Complaints, and we have the body which takes decision. It is from 7 peoples, all appointed by the parliament. So let's say, and something which is really important, we don't get any cent from the body, from the state budget. So the regulatory body is totally financed by itself. So we in AMA, of course, we faced different times a lot of complaints saying that this and that was written in online, but we don't have the law. For example, if complaints, 20% of complaints exactly are for the online media, and we can say nothing about that. But I will tell you 2 specific cases happening during my mandate there. At the beginning of March 22, a few days after the military aggression against Ukraine, we have 2 cases that I remember. In one case, there was a clearly expression of justification of the violence and every form of genocide from Russia to Ukraine, and one was glorifying the leader of Russia. And we discussed a lot in our institution, because, you know, we always always because of the skepticism everywhere, and we are, let's say, every decision that we take, we are very careful because it's a very narrow line between the freedom of expression from one part and from the other part the propaganda, or what is propaganda. So at this point, we were like, it is a propaganda in these cases. Should we stress to the televisions the situation to not be repeated anymore, or this is freedom of expression? But, of course, we drew the attention to the televisions and said that this is propaganda, and you are one of them was a national television, and no one can do it in public frequency, which is totally undoable. And another case that I remember, it is, for example, the conspiracy happens too much during pandemic time, and no one was able to, at least in my country, no one was able to say this is not true, or to facing this type of persons and individuals who were more than medicals, were more than priests, were more than everything. And but it was a case of anti-Semitist story. For example, someone in national television saying that the white race is superior, that Hitler was a project of Jewish. They send him to Germany. Some totally craziness in the television, but it was even the hour. It was the problem because it was 6 p.m. when the children are in front of the television. You cannot spread this kind of I don't know, conspiracy, let's say so. And at that point, we decided to fine the television with 1,000 or 1,700 euro, which is nothing, but it's awareness to not repeat more this kind of, because it violates a lot of our broadcasting code and our laws.
Thank you, Armela. I just have to cut you off here too.
Okay. I said I have the problem as Tijana.
Okay. So, yeah, by the way, the last example that you mentioned, in Germany, this would be clearly a criminal offense. So there is a very strict line that we draw here. But thank you very much for also showing us that you were kind of pioneering in this area of fake news back then, the term. And with that, I would like to hand over to Zoran, because North Macedonia is also in one way pioneering when it comes to media literacy. I understand that you are quite leading the way, so please.
Yes, thank you. Before I start to talk about media literacy, is maybe, according to my opinion, the best weapon to fight with fake news and disinformation, I would like to share with you a very interesting survey titled "The Effect of Disinformation and Foreign Influences on the Democratic Processes in North Macedonia," carried out by the Metamorphosis Foundation. These are the categories that citizens identify as the main sources of disinformation. On the first place are politicians, 91%, journalists and media, 90%, social media, 81%, and internet portals, 78%. According to this analysis, disinformation are mostly presented on the social networks and internet portals, and less so in traditional media such as newspapers and radio and TV outlets. The analysis of the domestic media spaces identify two types of disinformation. The first one is disinformation raising as a consequence of journalist recklessness or error, unprofessional journalistic work, and lack of editorial policy. And second, fake news and malicious placement of certain narratives in the public sphere aimed at achieving a certain goal. As I said, my personal opinion is that the media literacy is the best weapon, or maybe the best tool, to fight with the fake news and disinformation. Guided by its legal obligation to promote media literacy, back in 2070, Agency for Audio and Audiovisual Media Services in North Macedonia launched an initiative to establish a media literacy network. The list of the network founders included educational institutions, private and state, civil society organizations, media outlets, and state institutions, of which two were the Ministry of Labor and Ministry of Education. Since then, the number of the network's members has been growing constantly, from 32 in 2017 to 78 today. One of the most important activities of the media literacy network in North Macedonia is organizing the media literacy days 4 times this year from 2019, and today, the 1st of November 2022, is the wrap-up of the 4th Media Literacy Days, as an annual event which this year took place under the motto "Think critically, gather the whole story." By organizing this event, our country joined in the UNESCO's Global Week of Media and Information Literacy. In the course of these past 7 days, the public had an opportunity to attend a number of workshops, debates, video and panel discussions, presentations, exhibitions, and movie screenings on all kinds of topics, with a special emphasis being placed on the development of critical thinking without stereotypes, diversity of disinformation in the Western Balkans, the next generation in the age of disinformation, journalistic writing techniques and recognition of disinformation, and others. As a part of agency takes active part in promoting and raising the professional journalistic reporting standards, along with the media, journalistic associations, and the self-regulatory body for ethics in the media. In this context, with the support of the Council of Europe, several their publications, the publications and documents of the Council of Europe, have been translated into Macedonian and published and distributed to the general public. The second very important regulatory aspect in fighting with fake news is the financial independence and sustainability of the media outlets and ownership transparency. Because I will share with you one example, not directly connected with the media, the owner of the media outlets in Macedonia, but how dirty capital or some Russian companies can move into the owner structure in the media outlets. Few years ago, the government of Kosovo built a railway to Macedonia, but from our side, maybe more than 30 years, we don't have the railway to connect the Kosovo. We are talking about 15 kilometers. And in 2020, the government and the parliament adopted a few laws in the parliament, and that changes gave an opportunity to the government to sign the direct contract with some foreign company which is powerful to build that railway. But after a few months, the government informed the public that agreement was abolished because the owner of that Croatian company, which should build a railway, was some Russian guy, and that his company, Russian, was sanctioned by the European Council this year. And now we still don't have the railway with Kosovo, but that's the reason why we as a regulatory authority started annually to check the owner structure of the media outlets to ban, to stop if some company, I don't know, from non-democratic countries, from Russia or from somewhere in the world, to become owner of the media in Macedonia.
Thank you so much, and thank you for stressing the importance of ownership transparency. This is definitely something that is always raised also by the EU in its accession reports. I would, as we only have less than 15 minutes left, I would like, I see two women, this chair is hot. This woman, please come forward, then we have got you, then I saw you, then I saw you, and then sorry for pointing with my naked finger at you, that is not very polite. Yes.
Sorry, I'm non-media person, so I will challenge you from this perspective. But I realize that credible information and sources are very relevant for... Yeah, I will. For my work as a researcher in the Belgrade Center for Security Policy. That's why I want. Sorry. There were here, you can find the present representatives of different organizations who did amazing work on documenting disinformation, fake news in the Western Balkan countries. What I want to actually challenge you and use maybe hosts and Ms. Jelišić, presence of Ms. Jelišić is actually to point out where we need more of your help in fighting disinformation, but not within Western Balkans, but within EU and EU countries. Because we have seen during this war in Ukraine how people and citizens in the EU or wider Europe can be mobilized in supporting Ukraine and Ukrainian people. But we are in the process of EU integration for almost 2 decades. And what we need to see is actually how people within EU countries can be mobilized in support of their governments, for their governments to support enlargement processes and EU integration. So whenever I come to different capitals of the EU, I fight with lack of knowledge, lack of information or disinformation order within. And I'm trying to every time deconstruct the image of my country or provide additional information. So for us as a civil society, it's very hard to fight this game. And it's not only about Russia, it's about how to actually fight with situation like when the EU country such as Hungary is entering media space, not only in Serbia, but Croatia, Slovenia, and is taking over media outlets and then supporting right-wing leaders in undermining as well EU integration, not only the other things. So like when we are talking about international information disorder in the Western Balkans, we should have always several sides. We have talked about this, what we documented. We talked a lot about us. The thing is, I would like to see this process, how this Berlin process can be used to build maybe support within Germany, but not only in Germany, within the EU and different image of the Western Balkans. So thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I suggest that we collect 3 comments or 3 questions before we do a round of answering.
Thank you. I'm Izabela Kisić from Helsinki Committee for Human Rights in Serbia, but I also have a media background. Actually, I was a journalist in also difficult time. We speak a lot about investigative journalism and fact-checking. But the other side of coin, it's analytical journalism, and we completely neglected analytical journalism. We don't have any more analytical journalism, actually, in Western Balkans. We cannot debunk false news, propaganda, without analytical journalism. And we need to put much more effort in developing analytical journalism and to keep analytical journalism. Analytical journalism today it's under the pressure not just from political actors, but also from the market, from owners of the media. And I'm actually inspired to speak about this today because I have got news today that one professional journalist which has expertise in debunking this nationalistic matrix, Russian propaganda, etc., got fired because her articles cannot make money, actually. Owners, they need the market, they need the money, and they need also sensationalism, the same as the tabloids. And we should...
Thank you so much. Yeah, this was a very important intervention, and I saw Adelheid taking notes already. And then we had the third lady. Do you want to come up?
And this guy.
Yeah, we'll do a round of answering, and then we have to discuss with the organizers whether we get more time.
Thank you so much. We'll be extremely brief. I also have media background, and I also worked for the European External Service, the Stratcom program. And it's really unfortunate that we only had in our program one Western Balkan country. We need to have an action plan involving EU member states and Western Balkan countries because the issues are the same. The war in Ukraine, Russia's propaganda, COVID-19 pandemic have shown that the issues of disinformation, misinformation, fake news are common. And we should not talk about creating networks within the Western Balkans, even though I have to tell you that in the Western Balkans we have more fact-checking services than in some member states. In Greece we only have one fact-checking service. So maybe the Western Balkans know more about how to combat disinformation than some of the member states, which also have their own media problems, and I'm talking about my country, Greece. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah. So both of you pointed out that within the EU we have some problems as well. Jasna, do you want to comment on the...
Yes, to the extent that I could grasp, I actually thank very much for this question on how much citizens within the EU member states know about the Western Balkans and the need to, I mean, this is something that I have been writing for a very long time, and I published a paper in 2008 explaining the need that the accession process, if you want the accession process to succeed, the citizens of the EU member states need to know about the Western Balkans more. But we first need to do the right thing, complete the reforms in the Western Balkans, and then communicate about them in the EU member states. And actually, we are European External Action Service, which means we are responsible for the area outside of the EU member states. But still, we got a little mandate from the EU member states to communicate a bit about the Western Balkans in the EU member states. This is how we came up with this campaign, Europeans Making a Difference. Tijana was one of our profiles, heroes, a European who is making a difference, who has been kind of making an internationally worthy effort in fighting disinformation. So this was, at least you're talking with somebody who has been actively working. What I believe is absolutely essential is, of course, that the Western Balkans fulfills the requirements of the accession, and then that the diplomatic services of the candidates engage more to explain that within the EU member states, of course, with the support. But we, as the European External Action Service, cannot do that on behalf of the candidate countries. This is part of the process that I would say. I think it's absolutely essential that the information is shared, that the image of the region is updated, and that whatever success and whatever advancement in the EU integration process is achieved in the region is immediately, effectively, and accurately communicated within the EU member states. What I also want to say, the colleague was I also have a journalistic background, and I know when I was a journalist in the previous century, the fact-checking was done in a newsroom. We didn't have to have separate bodies to fact-check what we write. It's a part of the journalistic work to get your facts right. You can have your opinion, but you cannot have your own facts. That was something that was absolutely essential. But what I would say when it comes to investigative journalism and so on, and analytical journalism, I used to be an analytical journalist, and I think there is analytical journalism in the region, and I think it probably depends on the demand. I have a feeling that the demand for analytical journalism is decreasing, hence the supply is also decreasing in a way. There is a more, the feeling is a more inclination towards infotainment, hence the supply of infotainment. It's very difficult to feed analytical journalism if there are no readers for analytical journalism.
Jasna,
so that's really something to be addressed.
Adelheid, did you want to reply to the question of analytical journalism? Or?
Yes, but I also wanted to reply to the question of how can we promote the Western Balkans in the EU. I think talking from a consumer perspective in Germany, or from a media representative perspective, unfortunately, I think there are a couple of reasons. One reason is that we have very few correspondents of international media in the Balkans. I think this is one of the very important reasons. Some very few journalists are based in maybe Athens or in Vienna, or maybe one or two in Belgrade. That's all. So we don't get enough and proper information. And I think this is something, of course, we as Deutsche Welle or the BBC, we have a lot of correspondence, but normal German media, big newspapers, lack the money to send their own correspondence to the region. And I'm talking about a relatively rich country. In other countries, they probably don't have. So I think this is one important reason. And the second reason, of course, is good news are no news. Mm-hmm. And of course, if there are clashes, for example, at the Kosovo-Serbian border, everybody goes there. But if there's some of the chapters fulfilled in the access process, nobody will report about it. So I think it's a big challenge for the people in the Western Balkans to reshape the image. And of course, it is something that is done by the people, by the government, by the NGO, by the media, and it will take time. So maybe this is not a good answer, but this is my feeling about it. Second, if it comes to analytical journalism, I'm a bit more critical. about analytical journalism, because I think there's a lot of analytical journalism in the Balkans, and everybody wants to be an analyst, and nobody wants to be a journalist anymore. And this really makes me angry, because I want what Jasna said: facts, facts, facts. 2 sources, 3 sources, and make clear who is the source of this information, and make proper journalism. And I really find this is one of the old illnesses in the Western Balkan media, that you cannot clearly separate information from comments or analytical journalism. And this is, so for me, this is the basic. We first have to be very, very clear in our formats and to divide it. And then, of course, we also need analysis of the situation and everything. But I think there's a lot.
Okay, so now I have... Sorry, I have a...
Analysts.
Everybody's talking about is an analyst.
So my job is... I have a nasty task now, because we've been running out of overtime. I've been signaled more than once to please end. I want to give 30 seconds, Armela, and 30 seconds to Tijana. And then please bear with us, and let's complete this panel.
I have to conclude very quickly. Okay, please invest or see this Western Balkan media, and this is for EU, the Bureau of EU. Why that? Because oftenly, not only in Albania, but everywhere in the Balkan, we are hearing that is media, that's media said. So people are going, are thinking to not trust, media is not a trustable resource anymore. And if we lose this component of the society, we'll be all lose.
Yeah, trust is key. Yeah. That's a very good last word.
Very, very short comment on how someone would get fired for not drawing enough clicks and stuff like that. I think we need to consider supply and demand in the context that the audience has been cultivated and educated by algorithms of huge platforms for over a decade now. And this is something that is often overlooked in policy conversations about the media and information, and it's a very important, I would say, a pillar of how to tackle these things. So when I say de-incentivize disinformation, this means that the platforms need to develop new models, what to show to their audiences, and how you can place quality information in at least a similar way as sensationalism is being placed, successfully placed now on all of these platforms. So I cannot stress that enough.
Practically change business models.
Exactly.
So thank you so much. Thank you for a lively discussion. Before we close the panel, I've got one more housekeeping rule. So the organizers have asked me to remind you that at 6:15 there's the next spotlight panel on dealing with the past and reconciliation. And with that, I would like to say cooperation is key, fact-checking is powerful if we join forces, and trust is key. So thank you very much to my panel. Thank you for the audience. Sorry.
Thank you.